This is Innovating Leadership, Co-Creating Our Future. I'm your host, Maureen Metcalf, the founder and CEO of the Innovative Leadership Institute, where we help leaders be future ready. Helping us in that mission today is Theo Edmonds, culture futurist, entrepreneur, artist, and poet. We'll be talking about whether American innovation lost its sense of wonder. Theo, what are the big problems that are causing innovation to stall right now?
The big problems today are think of threefold. Before we get to the problem, we have to lay out the logic model around what is wonder, because it's kind of like the moon, and the moon is always in our lives, and we write sonnets about it, and we sit under the moon and we anthropomorphize the man in the moon and all those kinds of things. In reality, even though the moon is omnipresent, we don't really know that much about it as a human. So wonder, creativity, we use these words all the time without really digging into what they mean. And so what I mean by them is I'm focusing on wonder as the fuel of creativity. And wonder is this balancing point between awe and curiosity. Awe is this expansive state, and curiosity is more of this kind of finite state. So you can get curious about something with a little effort, you can scratch that itch and you may become curious about something else, but it's terminal. Whereas awe is ever expanding. You spend too much time at one side or the other, too much at curiosity, you're going to lose sight of the big picture. You spend too much time in awe, you may actually never get anything done, because can be existential, it can be fearful even. And so wonder is what keeps the balance moving between those two things, and we need both of them. Wonder is an epistemic emotion. It's our discovery emotion. It's why we want to know more, and just beyond wanting to know more, it's what drives us to actually enjoy the pursuit of knowledge. I think it was Socrates that first said, wisdom begins in wonder. So if we can agree that wonder fuels creativity, creativity fuels innovation, innovation fuels growth, that our problems kind of sit somewhere in that. So in America, when culture and commerce, where they intersect, is in business innovation. Culture and commerce, when they're not connected intentionally, innovation suffers. And where we see the big problems today are three big buckets that I call fear, frustration, and fragmentation. So when we think about fear at this intersection of culture and commerce, we see a lot of industries underperforming in innovation skills. We've all gotten kind of used to that World Economic Forum Future of Work Job Skills report. The first 5 on there are analytical and creative thinking, are 1 and 2. 3, 4, and 5 are self-awareness, resilience, and curiosity. Those are just 5 of the 8 or 9 skills that we have combined into understanding creativity. Innovation is the application of creativity. When we think about underperforming innovation skills, that should be concerning, but it also should be good news to us in some way, because skills are transferable, they're teachable, you can upskill them, there is action that can be taken. Teams and companies often overlook and misunderstand and certainly fail to measure many of these innovation skills that the World Economic points to as being critical for success in the future of work. Another thing around fear is that executives have internalized a narrative that says if you lean too much into creativity, that productivity will suffer, when in actuality, the research says just the opposite. I've thought a lot lately about Franklin Delano Roosevelt when he said the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. That still holds true today. Fear is the top barrier to innovation. It is reported by 85% of practitioners in the innovation ecosystem. And even though it's the top fear, less than 11% say that their companies even acknowledge it, let alone do anything to address it. And so as you kind of disaggregate mountains of data, what we see is that wonder, trust, freedom, and joy are specific strategies that have lots of empirical science behind them for overcoming fear in teams and being able to unlock the courageous innovation that moves beyond incrementalism that fear contracts and causes into the kind of transformational breakthroughs that the markets are demanding today. Fear of the unknown, fear of being able to know what to do with something once you really have it defined. Then there's frustration. We don't really have baselines, and we're not measuring them. There's no baseline on them. And so with this lack of effective tools, with that lack of effective measures, it really leaves a lot of the creative potential of our society untapped. When you're talking about innovation, that is not a good thing. And it causes a lot of leaders to be frustrated. So fear, frustration, and then fragmentation. Experience in America teaches us that when we put together and unite the very best from business, science, and the arts, that's when discovery breaks wide open and begins to happen. Put a human on the moon. It gave us the microchip. It gave us Hollywood and hip hop. I would even go so far as to say that our sense of wonder is perhaps our nation's legacy to the world. We have a sense of wonder that is unparalleled in human history of what we have been able to do in terms of a convergent goal direction around using that wonder to bring new things into existence that have created incredible value for many, many types of stakeholders around. But today we have also set up our systems where business, science, arts, different industries, they're all still operating in silos. What happens then is that misses the bigger picture. And that's why a lot of them are struggling. And so when we have these fragmented creativity networks, we fail to integrate cognitive, emotional, and social aspects of creativity into our research insights. We fail to advance technologies. And then finally, there's the AI-driven industries. When we think about all of the investment that has been made in bringing forth AI strategies in companies across sectors, the massive investments that are being made in this. And yet every CEO I talk to doesn't really fully understand how those investments are going to be converted into enterprise value. They know that there is a loose definition. They know that everybody's doing it, so they feel obligated to make the investments. But until we could do a better job of connecting strategy with foresight, we're going to be continually frustrated about why aren't these investments paying off. Also, importantly, with AI, there's one more thing, and that is sameness and monoculture. In nature, we see that when an invasive species like kudzu is this big invasive species that kind of takes over an ecosystem, when that takes over an ecosystem, what it makes appear is that there's sameness in monoculture when we know that under that layer, there's incredible variety and vibrancy. And when nature gets too heavy on the monoculture side, it self-corrects. We see this all the time. And so think about social media without really even trying, kind of made us all a little bit more alike. If you're traveling on the interstate, this stop is going to have the same collection of stores and fast food restaurants as the next stop. And so as we become more alike, as we become more of a monoculture because we are paying attention to all of these signals around us, that's not good news if innovation is your goal. Because if you don't have that variety of options to choose from, your innovations are going to constantly have a blind spot that is just not good.
Theo, how do these problems show up in the marketplace as signals and trends?
It's a great question. They first show up as stories. Robert Shiller had a brilliant book a few years ago, Narrative Economics, where he looked at it wasn't, say, events like the crash of 29 that led to the recession, but it was actually how the stories about that event got told in the media that led to changes in people's behaviors. And I think so. Stories is where these things first show up. And those stories can look a little bit different in a lot of ways, but I look for them as a culture futurist in 4 areas. If we can think about innovation as the story we tell between where we are and where we think we want to be and how we're going to get there, any changes in that story are signals that we should be paying attention to. If you think about the wheel and the internet, they did something almost identical to each other. The wheel changed people's conception of time. It changed our expectation of how long we expect fill in the blank activity to take. It changed our expectation of how work gets done. And so the internet did the same thing. Anytime that there is an innovation that shifts our conception of time, it's something that I pay a lot of attention to. Those changes in expectations conveyed through stories. And so if we have stories around how time is changing, it's going to change how we do things. If we have stories around identity shifts, it's going to change how we experience and interpret things. If we have changes around motivation in our stories that we tell about why we do as a society certain things, it's going to color how we feel about those things. And if we have changes in how we explore, that's going to change how we're thinking about things. So those do, experience, feel, and think, those are all questions around how innovation stories find their way into our culture.
I was on a conversation earlier today about Gartner's predictions. It used to take us 14 days to do something, and now it takes 4 minutes. Back to the fear, companies will be delighted that the cost presumably is lower when you look at the AI cost, and they're sparking humans to be afraid.
Yeah, you bring up the cost. That's a really great point that you made, because the other side of cost is opportunity cost. That's where I mentioned earlier about connecting strategy and foresight. If we are only executing on strategy and a piece of that strategy is cost, right, as we're assigning it to, risk mitigation or human resources productivity, and we're not thinking about the opportunity cost from doing it this way versus that way is getting ready to change with AI. Our expectations around how something is supposed to get done is getting ready to change because of AI. One of the things that I see in every organization I go to, I call it innovation grief.
I love that.
It's a powerful thing. Grief is in the brain. It's a relearning process. Our brain is relearning around things that are no longer physically there that we expected to be there. And it's a hard kind of period for any one of us to go through. But when you think about grief that doesn't go anywhere or doesn't get processed, that's never a good thing, because there's a whole lot of science that shows what that does to the body, leading to this kind of thing called the neurodynamic process that ultimately can cause inflammation in the body, that can ultimately cause different kinds of diseases. But innovation grief is a specific kind of thing. And if you think about how the market demands these rapid cycles of innovate, and we often valorize failure as kind of this wonderful thing to be able to fail fast, fail often, those kinds of tropes. But if you're together with a team in a company and you've been working for 12 months, 16 months, something happens in the marketplace that completely changes the reason you all are going this direction rather than another direction, and the CEO comes in, and within inside of a week, that team that had been part of your identity, had been part of your purpose, gets assigned to a different project doing something else, maybe gets split up, a new team forms. If you go through that enough times and nothing is really in place that helps the team members successfully navigate those identity shifts that they're going to go through, it's going to contract their ability to be creative over time as a group together. It's going to contract it because, it's going to impact how they trust each other. It's going to impact how they trust leadership. It's going to impact how they feel like their contributions matter. And we've got all of our systems set up today just to manage the mechanics of that team change. We don't have anything set up to manage the KPIs, key performance indicators, around the identity changes that people are going through that we know in the research unlocks creativity.
So I understand my team used to be part of supply chain, and now they're part of business development. And there's a slightly different objective, and we shift on the org chart, but we also shift how we do business, and our stakeholders are different. For some individuals, their job, the identity they carry with that job is now changed. That chipping away at what is meaningful to me or my meaning in the world will become more significant with AI.
It absolutely will. There's also the positive side of that. It can become more significant in a very beneficial way if leaders understand how to lead creativity in teams. So much of the way we talk about creativity has been focused at this individual level, and that's not what I'm talking about here. My work focuses 100% on team and organizational level constructs. When most people talk about creativity, they say, oh, that's a creative person, or what a creative product that is. In those situations, we're using creative as an adjective to describe an individual, to describe an individual thing, but creativity is a process. That process to go anywhere and to become enterprise value, to become value in society, is a team level approach. Again, going back to these stories, Maureen, we've got this beautiful story about American exceptionalism through the years, and that's true. We've done amazing things, but stories change over time. And we often tell the story in America of the lone genius, in their scientific lab or the garage in Palo Alto or wherever it might be, that comes up with this world-changing idea. In reality, that is just a lone person working in a lab or in a garage, unless those ideas connect into larger systems and connect with teams who can build it out. This idea around genius as a lone enterprise, when you go back to the etymology of the word genius, it means the protective spirit of a person or a place. And when you look at it that way, genius is really pointing to this alignment between individual and society, individual and collective. Our brains are wired to be social for almost that very reason. And so if we think about genius as a cultural outcome, the ability of a group of different people coming from different backgrounds to work together to do something that just one of them could not do on their own, navigating that creative tension that comes along with that and being able to sit in that tension long enough without having to feel like you have to solve the tension away in order to find the deeper questions, that's what leads to the transformational impact that we want innovation to have. That synchronization between you and your environment, you and your team, you and your social networks is incredibly important because at the end of the day, that's where new cultural and economic value come from.
It's crucial thinking about, it's not scientists sitting in their lab solving a problem, but that only becomes a solution when it's put into practice.
Yes, the work in the lab is very important, but it's only a piece of a much bigger picture.
How can wonder become the spark for reignition?
Wonder is what activates focus in some ways. If we think about our brains and how creativity works in the brain, there's something called the salience network. And the salience network, it really gives focus and attention to a specific area. It connects three other networks. It connects the default mode network, which is where we hold memory and identity. And the default mode kind of operates, like in the background. It operates to focus the executive control network, which is how we make our decisions. It's where we're really engaging in executive tasks. And importantly, there's always this kind of limbic system, that emotion that we're all feeling, like our brains receive new information metaphorically, but also scientifically, emotionally, before we receive that information logically. And the salience is what gives focus to all three of those working together. And so if we know that's how our individual brains work, what does that look like when you scale it up to an industry or to a nation or to an economy? Culture is kind of like our default mode network. It's always operated, it's always shaping, it's holding memory, it's helping us form our identity. Commerce is our executive control. That's our innovation systems. That's how we're making decisions that create value. And media today operates like a limbic system. It's carrying that emotion between culture and commerce, telling us how we're to feel about this or to that. It's either causing us to fear something or it's causing us to really embrace it. Wonder at a societal level becomes then very important because it's what gives, like Robert Schiller talked about those stories in narrative economics, wonder becomes the base of the stories that we tell about how culture, commerce, and the media are interacting and where we should be focusing all of the immense resources that come along with all three of those fields. And so if you take our individual brain and what we know around how creativity works in the brain, you scale that up to societal level, culture, commerce, and media, wonder then becomes the North Star. It becomes the trigger. It becomes the catalyst. It becomes both the story and the strategy that we use in organizing culture, commerce, and media together to really do something exceptional. Culture is what creates our narrative and gives it meaning. Commerce is what transforms that meaning into action. Media is what makes it impactful. And wonder is that activator that focuses the attention of those three other things on the potential for a breakthrough.
As I'm working with a client, how do I do this? What's it look like?
I'll give you a perfect example. There's something that I often use, an exercise, when I'm facilitating a group of executives or a company. And I call it the Wonder Walk. And depending upon how big the room is and how many people are in the room, I'll say to the participants, pick a number between 1 and whatever, depending on the size of the room. They pick their number, and then I have them stand up and face a direction, any direction. And I ask them to walk that number of steps. And then they do that. And then I ask them to find 3 things right where they are that sparks a sense of wonder. And one of the very first times that I was ever using this exercise, there was a CFO in the audience. The way the room was set up, that CFO had walked the perfect number of steps to land him toe to toe, looking at a blank beige office wall. And I thought, well, this should be interesting. But it was that person that came up with so many things that just lit the whole room open. And here's what he said in the report out. He said, when I got to that wall, I thought, oh, I don't get it. But then he saw there was a little chip of paint in the wall, that he saw the color it was before it had been painted, the color that it was at that moment. Then he said, well, I wonder what the wall looked like when it was at a color. And who chose this color? Where did this color come from? And like, was it a paint company? And who mixed this color and decided it was going to be this shade of beige and not that shade of beige? And where did they live and what they have for breakfast? So he just kept unfolding in this really beautiful way because he was letting himself go back and forth between curiosity and awe at the immensity of the most simple things are connected to all the other things. So the interconnection that he was able to find from that wonder wall is just one example of what that can look like in very practical terms. But going back to those kind of three problems that we have in fear, frustration, and fragmentation, we don't do a really good job of what that CFO did very simply, standing in front of a beige wall. He was able to overcome those three things and find this amazing creativity and curiosity and sense of awe that was all around him in that moment. I think if we can engineer that back into our innovation processes and also connect it to the return on investment, W.O.N.D.E.R becomes this really, really powerful tool. The good news there is that we have a lot of science that can be leveraged to manage and help us to focus where to get the biggest bang for the buck.
How is Creativity America leveraging these insights? First, what is Creativity America?
Creativity America it's a brand new initiative, but we've been building it for the last 3 years. Over the next 10 years, it's a movement that is a collaboration between some of America's top cognitive neuroscientists and industrial and organizational behavioral psychologists, artists, and business leaders all around increasing the creative brain capital of the American innovation value chain and workforce by 25% over the next decade. The W.O.N.D.E.R economy, it's the human side, like we've been talking about, of technology and the future of work. And in the W.O.N.D.E.R economy, creativity is currency. We live at such a unique time because of things like generative AI, that the value of a question, especially one that is not a question that is normally asked, has immense economic value today in ways that maybe just even 3 years ago it wouldn't. But it's the technology that has forced this intentional conversation around what is human creativity and also caused us to start to put a value, an economic value on that human creativity that potentially is more valuable in monetary terms than many of these small incremental products and services that go around AI, because a good question is going to lead to a higher output because of the way the technology works. And so as we're developing the W.O.N.D.E.R economy, so there's a leadership component to what we're doing with Creativity America. Then the second piece, there's a research component, which is the developing this creative brain capital, this measurable, actionable scientific dashboard to allow teams to measure creativity, cognitive, emotional, and social creativity as a KPI in their innovation portfolios. And then finally, a 6-step process. Just like business accelerators teach the core business skills that everybody needs, we've got a 6-step process called W.O.N.D.E.R that allows teams to pick up a lot of those human side skills that we all know are so important, but beyond platitudes around them, we haven't had really good measurements, science, and tools to be able to implement them in a systematic way across industries. And so we're trying to bring some precision to this very, very important conversation.
Why would a leader who's trying to balance between employee engagement and customer journeys and dropping money to the bottom line, why would they choose to invest here and create one more thing that employees have to do or teams have to do?
I love this question, and I get it a lot. The reason that the World Economic Forum says that analytical creative thinking, self-awareness, resilience, and curiosity are the top 5 skills is not because the World Economic Forum wants everybody to feel good. It's because they are critical to economic performance. When you think about engagement, all the things that you just said, those are these one-off, siloed out things. Let's stress engagement as if it's a standalone. Let's stress employee wellness as if it's a standalone. Let's stress all the things. And as long as we have these standalone approaches, we really miss how humans work. Humans work based upon this integrated, interconnected set of things that they bring to the table. If we look at the success of employee engagement programs, I just saw Gallup produce its latest findings just about a month ago. Employee engagement is at an all-time low. If we look at employee well-being, how many companies are out there supposedly delivering employee well-being? Those are not going the right direction either in terms of metrics. Entrepreneurs also a very specific area of concern for me, because those are our nation's net new job creators. And entrepreneurial teams could be a startup company, or it could be an entrepreneurial team within a company. When we look at the mental well-being of entrepreneurs, it's been declining for 10 years, and it's recently just gone off a cliff, just at a time when we're needing them more. So what I would say to executives is part of the frustration that you're feeling is because all of these things have been disconnected. All of the things you named, we have assigned to HR or HR adjacent pieces of an organization. So when we do that, what we're assigning employee engagement, employee well-being, those types of things to, we're assigning them to cost centers that have a risk mitigation function in organizations. And we separate that out from where we're placing our bets to grow the company, when we know those things are connected. And so it's about connecting those things. When I talked about a while ago about connecting strategy and foresight, that's what I was talking about. Cultural futurism answers three questions. Where does a company take action? How does that specific company know that the action they're taking is a wise action? And what are they going to need to stay resilient and curious when the unexpected absolutely will happen? And so we bring those three questions into radical clarity for leaders so they can make horizon planning decisions rather than making these one-off decisions about a little incremental bump here or something there based upon, I've picked up the magazine in LAX, and by the time I get off in LaGuardia, I've got the one answer magic bullet that's going to fix everything. Those do not exist. And so with Creativity America, it's a holistic, integrated solution that is very human in its presentation, very human in its approach. We've gathered the best scientists to bring scientific rigor to it, but not everybody's got to have a PhD to understand it. That was very, very important to us. A 25% boost in creativity, what I talk about is creative brain capital. Think about the billions that could unlock in GDP, the new products, the new services, the new business models it could fuel. That's the reason that the World Economic Forum focuses so much on creativity. Come along with that, the higher return on investment, innovation grief goes down, burnout, all of these things that we've been talking about become possible when we introduce the right tools, the right processes, and the right metrics to measure and manage creativity as part of an organization's portfolio in the KPI in the same way that we're measuring the return on innovation investments that we're making.
We've talked about story. Help me to see the story and how it actually plays out for a company.
Tourism may be an interesting place to start. If we think about companies like Airbnb that have become really, really successful in customer experience, what they've been able to do is to personalize and connect individual travel to individual meaning, and then build a community online built around that kind of experience. So that's one example, because when we're traveling to someplace, we're traveling based upon a wonder-based principle. We're wanting to learn something. I was telling somebody the other day, I went to a state travel association meeting here recently. They were putting these very big numbers up that travel in this state was almost a $300 billion annual boost to the economy of the state. And I asked them, I said, I'm sure you have ways of reinvesting that economic benefit that comes because of travel. Of course we do. We have all these ways. Then I said to him, but the number that got me is that you also said that there was about 200 plus million discrete individuals that were coming through. And when you travel, if you're a runner like I am, that run that you take becomes a little bit easier. You're noticing things, that you feel a little lighter. You start to look at things more deeply than you might have before, certainly than you do if you're, back in your home city and you're driving to work. We stop looking at things. We stop noticing things. But when you're traveling, that wonder comes back. That engagement with the world comes back. It was striking to me that there was no conversation around what the curiosity, the wonder, et cetera, that these travelers were having, these insights that were happening because of the place they were in, that were going back and inuring to businesses and development wherever they were coming from. So we invest the economic benefit from the travel industry that comes from the heads and beds but we don't do anything with the curiosity, the ideas that happen because of the travel.
We went to Egypt and Dubai a couple years ago. And I wasn't that excited about let's just go to another city, Dubai. I've been to big cities. But what was fascinating is what the UAE has done in 50 years of converting a society that was predominantly nomadic Bedouin to one of the most sophisticated technological cities in the world and one of the safest. I went from city to absolute wonder with they have accomplished something that has not been done at a scale. It's not like there's a building. The world's tallest building right now is built on sand, which meant that they had to invent new technology. So I come back fascinated about how did that happen? How do they structure their society? How are they structuring society for a post-oil world so that it's not going to be we were fabulous and then we decline? What can we learn from that would be then pulled back into culturally appropriate for companies I'm consulting with?
It's a fascinating proposition, what you just said, isn't it? Because what you laid out while we're talking about travel, you could apply that to high-end consumer goods. You could apply that to financial services. You could apply that for sure to healthcare. But for the longest time, we have kind of done this reductionist approach to let's create a solution that works for the most people. But now the expectation, because of artificial intelligence and other things, has been, I want my solution that works for me. And so our identities as consumer is beginning to change, and those expectations are beginning to change. Talking to a friend of mine the other day, and we were talking about the potential for some of the massive advancements in neuroscience when combined with applied quantum computing and so forth, to be able to have an entire industry sector that doesn't exist today based upon the buying and consuming of memories, whether they're yours or other people.
That will be fascinating.
And so as we think about the things that we're talking about now, that's the things that I'm looking at, is what doesn't exist today or exist in some other form as a signal, as a trend, that when we ask a different question of it, can point us to where there might be new opportunity. Because the one thing I want your listeners to be sure they understand is we're not laying out in Creativity America with the work that we're doing another risk mitigation or cost management strategy. What we're helping organizations do is to prepare their workforce, their R&D teams especially, how to become prepared for anything, as opposed to focusing all of the effort and burning through the time, talent, and treasure on trying to be prepared for everything. Everything is a risk question. Anything is an opportunity. And science is really caught up to where it can really be applied in a fascinating new way that allows leaders to think about things like creativity as an actionable strategic asset that can be invested in, grown, and empirically measured.
I love the idea that it's an actionable strategic asset. And I had a conversation actually this morning with a client about how their organization is preparing. As you've said, we know that stuff's going to happen. So we do need confidence that we can navigate, that we can thrive no matter what happens. And thrive will look different depending on the scenario.
That's it. That's it exactly. And that's where, if you spell out the word wonder, work like artist. Artists have a courageous imagination about them. So, it's a lot of these, again, World Economic Forum skill sets. We've done the heavy lifting, everything I'm getting ready to tell you, all have these skill sets that the World Economic Forum says. So work like artists. Observe like researchers. Identify these patterns, these insights. Navigate like entrepreneurs. Learn how to pivot, adapt creatively to new challenges. Dazzle like nature. There is a lot of information around us if we just look at nature and how nature operates. Explore mystery like humans. We often sideline mystery in the business context. And yet, when you look at how over the last 50 years, organized religion has gone down, we've seen an exact growth in spiritual, not religious. People identify spiritual, not religious. And that decline in organized religion also coincides with increases in purpose-driven marketing, workplace well-being, all these kind of things that we look at as holistic well-being that once were the province of something else, we're now assigning them to, our work lives. Entrepreneurship is a great example of that. So explore mystery like humans. And then finally, radiate like stardust. I love leaving people with that because I can see their minds start to turn just a little bit. And that idea came from the chair of the Chamber of Commerce here in Denver, Colorado, where I'm located. He's also the CEO of the Nature and Science Museum. And a couple of years ago at a big chamber meeting, he made, I thought, one of the most beautiful things I'd ever heard said in a business context. He said, look, I understand that we're all here for business, and that's what we should be here for. Economy is very important. But I want you to remember this, that everything that you think you're here for, that you feel so sure to you, your corporation, this city, the buildings that we're in, everything that humans have ever created to experience life is created from just two things: the things that we have pulled from the earth and human imagination. Both of those things come from the same place. They were quite literally born in the heart of a dying star. Both those things are stardust. So how is it that this building and your imagination are actually made from the same materials? So when I talk about radiating like stardust, this is that kind of final invitation to explore this incredible connection that is already there if we just look to see it. And sometimes it's as easy as landing face to face with a blank beige wall that prompts us to find it.
Theo, thank you. How do people learn more about you?
They can find me at my own website, Theo Edmonds, and that's Edmonds with an O.com, or at creativityamerica.com.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen, for having me. It's been a pleasure to be with you.